All right, so today we're diving deep into brining, a culinary secret for making chicken unbelievably juicy and flavorful. Have you ever noticed how chicken can sometimes, just turn out dry no matter how carefully you cook it?
Yeah, it's definitely a common problem, especially with leaner cuts like chicken breasts.
Right. It's frustrating.
Yeah.
But brining is the answer. And honestly, it's so much simpler than it sounds. What's kind of cool, though, is that brining isn't some newfangled trend.
No, not at all.
It's actually been around for ages, going way back to ancient civilizations before, refrigerators and stuff.
Exactly. It was a method of preserving food back then, especially meat.
Wow, so they were brining chicken in, ancient Rome or something.
Well, maybe not Rome specifically, but the concept of using salt to preserve food has been around for centuries. The salt acts as a natural preservative, you see, extending the shelf life of the meat considerably.
That's amazing. So we're talking about soaking chicken in salt water, and that was, their key to keeping food safe.
Precisely. It was a brilliant solution, really, for preserving food before refrigeration.
Hmm.
And, as people used brining for preservation, they stumbled upon this amazing side effect. It made the meat incredibly juicy and tender.
So it wasn't just about safety then, it was about taste and texture too. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty here. What exactly is happening during brining? I know it has something to do with osmosis, right?
Yes, osmosis is the key process at work. It's a bit scientific, but I'll try to explain it simply. Imagine a dry sponge. You put it in water, right? The water soaks into the sponge, plumping it up.
Okay, I can picture that.
Well, brining works in a similar way. The saltwater solution you create has a higher salt concentration than the chicken itself. So when you submerge the chicken in that solution, the water molecules naturally move into the chicken cells to try and balance things out.
So it's not just seasoning the chicken from the outside, it's actually changing the composition of the meat at, a cellular level.
Exactly. This process makes the chicken plumper, and that's why it's much juicier when it's cooked.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And you mentioned flavor too, right? How does brining impact the flavor of the chicken?
Well, as the water moves into the chicken, it carries the flavors of whatever you've added to your brine, whether that's herbs, spices, citrus, anything.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like infusing the chicken with flavor from the inside out.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like a marinade, but it goes much deeper than just surface flavoring. This is how you get those complex, delicious flavors throughout the meat.
So brining's like a two-for-one deal. It adds moisture and infuses flavor. I'm definitely intrigued. But are there any other, maybe less obvious benefits to brining? I'm thinking about texture, particularly with different cuts of chicken.
You're right, there's more to it. Brining doesn't just make the chicken juicier, it also makes it more tender. You see, the salt in the brine actually helps to break down some of the proteins in the chicken, especially the tougher ones.
Interesting. So it's almost like pre-tenderizing the meat.
That's a good way to put it. And this is especially helpful for leaner cuts, like those chicken breasts we talked about. They tend to dry out more easily. But by breaking down those proteins with brining, you end up with a much more tender and evenly cooked final product.
So brining really is a triple threat:
Mm,
moisture, flavor, and texture. It's like a culinary magic trick.
you could say that.
All right, this all sounds amazing. But let's get down to the practical stuff. For someone who wants to try brining at home, what's the simplest way to go about it?
Well, the basic process is really quite straightforward. You need water and salt. Kosher salt or sea salt are the best choices because they have a cleaner flavor than table salt. And a good starting point is a ratio of about a quarter cup of salt per quart of water. The most important thing is to make sure the salt completely dissolves in the water before you add the chicken.
Got it. Water, salt, dissolve. Pretty simple.
Mm.
But I'm guessing it gets more interesting than that. You mentioned those extra flavorings earlier. Is there a specific approach to take, or is it more about, personal preference?
It's definitely about personal preference, but there are some guidelines you can follow. For example, sugar is a common addition because it helps to balance out the saltiness and it can promote browning during cooking. And then you have your aromatics, herbs, spices, garlic, citrus zest. You could even add a splash of vinegar or lemon juice for some acidity.
Wow, so it's like building your own custom flavor profile. You can get really creative with it.
Exactly. That's the fun part. Let your taste buds be your guide. You can experiment with different combinations and see what you like best.
Well, I'm definitely going to have to try that. This is making me want to raid my spice cabinet right now.
Yeah.
But hold on, I have to ask about the most crucial part. Brining time. How long do you actually need to brine the chicken?
Brining time is crucial, you're right. It really depends on the size and the cut of the chicken you're using. For a whole chicken, you'll need more time, usually around 8 to 12 hours. But for chicken breasts, on the other hand, they only need about 1 to 4 hours. And for chicken thighs, it's somewhere in between about 2 to 6 hours.
So brining time is key. You don't want to under-brine it, but I'm guessing over-brining can also be a problem. Is there a way to make sure you're getting it just right?
One really important tip is to always brine your chicken in the refrigerator. That keeps the chicken at a safe temperature while it's soaking. And before you cook the chicken, make sure you rinse it thoroughly under cold water to remove any excess salt.
Right, safety first. Makes sense.
That's
So
good.
rinse and then just cook it like usual.
Exactly. Brining actually works well with just about any cooking method, whether you're roasting, grilling, frying, even poaching.
Wow, that's really versatile.
Yeah.
I can't believe something so simple can make such a big difference in the flavor and texture of chicken. It's a game changer for sure.
It really is. And, I think it's a good reminder that sometimes the simplest techniques, the ones that have been around for generations, are the most effective.
You know what? I completely agree. And what I love about brining is that it opens up so many possibilities. It's like you have a blank canvas to get creative with your flavor combinations.
Exactly. It's a technique with endless possibilities. And it really is remarkable how just brining can completely transform a simple ingredient like chicken.
It is. And it makes you think. We always assume that good cooking has to involve fancy gadgets or like ingredients you can't even pronounce. But this proves that some of the best techniques are, well, basic.
It's true. Sometimes those simple methods that have been around forever, well, they work for a reason, and brining is definitely one of those.
Absolutely. And you know what's great about brining? There's no one right way to do it. We've talked a bit about playing around with flavors, but are there like actual different brining methods you can try?
Yeah, definitely. You can explore some variations. For example, there's this thing called dry brining. So instead of actually soaking the chicken in liquid, you just rub the salt and seasonings, directly on the meat, and then you let it sit uncovered in the fridge.
Wait, so no liquid at all? How does that even work?
I know, it sounds kind of strange, but what happens is the salt actually draws moisture out from the chicken. And then that moisture dissolves the salt, creating like this concentrated brine. And then eventually all that gets reabsorbed back into the chicken.
So it's like reverse osmosis or something.
You got it.
That's amazing. So is there a difference in the final result between like the wet brining and the dry brining?
Well, both methods will give you that juicy, flavorful chicken. But with dry brining, you sometimes get a slightly crispier skin because the surface of the chicken's drier before you start cooking it.
Okay, interesting. So if crispy skin is your goal, maybe dry brining is the way to go. But, a lot of people are trying to watch their salt intake these days.
Right.
Is there a way to like brine without going overboard on the sodium?
That's a great question. If you're worried about salt, you can definitely reduce the amount you use in your brine. But just remember, salt is really important for that osmosis process to happen, so don't get rid of it entirely. You can also experiment with some alternatives, things like low-sodium soy sauce or even buttermilk. They have natural salts and enzymes that can help to tenderize the chicken.
So there's room to adjust the process based on what you're looking for. All right, so now let's get to the really fun part. Flavor combinations. I know you mentioned some of the basic ingredients, but I'm feeling adventurous. What are some more unexpected flavor combinations that could really like take brining to the next level?
Oh, there are so many options. One of my personal favorites is using Asian-inspired flavors. You can add ginger, garlic, soy sauce, and maybe a little sesame oil. This combination is especially good with grilled or roasted chicken.
Oh man, that sounds incredible. I can almost smell it now. What about something a little brighter, like with citrus?
Oh, for a really zesty and refreshing flavor, you could try a citrus and herb brine. Just combine lemon or lime juice with some fresh herbs like rosemary, thyme, parsley. This one's especially delicious with roasted or pan-seared chicken
Oh,
breasts.
that sounds perfect for summer.
Okay.
Last question. I love spicy food. Can you add some heat to a brine?
Of course. If you like things spicy, just throw in a few slices of jalapeno pepper or maybe a pinch of chili flakes to your brine. And you could even try smoked paprika. That adds a nice smoky, earthy heat. This works really well with, say, chicken thighs or wings.
Right. You've officially given me a million ideas for flavor combinations. I am so ready to start experimenting. But before we wrap things up, any final tips our listeners should keep in mind when they're brining?
Yeah, one thing I'd really emphasize is to avoid over-brining.
Right.
If you leave the chicken in the brine for too long, it can end up way too salty, and it can also have like this weird texture. So, it's always better to err on the side of caution and brine for a shorter time, especially if your brine is really concentrated.
Great advice. So, like with most things in life, it's all about finding that balance.
Absolutely.
All right, well, before we go, I'm curious to hear your personal favorite. If you had to pick one herb or spice that, like, takes your chicken brine to the next level, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'd have to say fresh thyme. It has this subtle earthiness that really goes well with chicken, and it doesn't overpower any of the other flavors in the brine.
Yeah, thyme is great. It adds that little extra something, a touch of warmth and sophistication to any dish. Man, I am ready to fire up the grill and try all of this out. I can already picture it. Like perfectly juicy, flavorful chicken. No more dry chicken at my house.
I think you'll be really happy with the results. It really is amazing what a difference brining makes.
And you know what? It's almost like we've rediscovered some ancient culinary secret,
Yep.
something that's been around for ages, but we kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, and it works with pretty much any way you want to cook chicken. Plus, you have all those options for different flavors.
Exactly. I mean, this has been a fascinating deep dive. We've gone through like the whole history of brining, the science behind it, and all those practical tips for trying it out at home.
Absolutely. We even threw in a few ideas for some creative flavor combos, too.
So to all our listeners, we really encourage you to give brining a try. You won't believe the difference it makes. And hey, don't forget to share your results with us on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Fork and Fry.
Yeah, we'd love to see what you come up with. And if you want more in-depth articles and recipes, you can visit our website at www.forkandfry.com.
And before we sign off, we have one last question for you. What is your absolute favorite herb or spice to add to your brine? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, happy cooking!